Well, personally, I don't think so. I mean, I think some of the other issues that are coming up are very much to our way of thinking in terms of probably better regulation, in terms of common asylum policy, those kind of areas. But I think one of the big problems is going to be presentational. I mean, we talk about the process all the time rather than the product. We know what people are interested in. People are interested in, if you want, the economy, in jobs, whatever. What we have to do is to translate some of these issues. And some won't translate very well, I understand that, but actually into things that concern people. It's all right for us as political elites to talk about, the grand scheme of things. I mean, if we're talking about enlargement, for example, we need to talk about that in terms that people understand. As it is, I mean, there's almost no connection on that issue, and it's one of the prime issues of the Belgian presidency, processing enlargement. Why is what I get asked. Now, I can explain to people who ask me in the pub why, but I don't think we're trying to explain it to the general public very effectively.
I mean, do you think that the danger is, Jean-Maurice Dehousse, that in sort of this whole debate about the future of Europe, that in a sense, Europe is again looking at its own navel, and really wouldn't it, as Glyn Ford says, be better to kind of address those issues that in the survey we were talking about, people want to see Europe dealing with, the environment, health, food policy, all those sort of issues, instead of the kind of, the institutional stuff all the time.
The world is changing, and the world is changing fast. 10 years ago, much less 20 years ago, we were not discussing about the change in the weather climate, and we were not discussing about alimentary problems. And we have discovered that those problems existed and that we could not deal with those problems piecemeal. No country, big or small, on a European scale. And I like to think that on the planet, on the scale of the planet, any European country is in some way a small country, even if it has a large historical tradition. We have to stand together, because if we don't stand together, we will have no voice in the world, much less in the coming world, where we will be less numerous, much less to begin with.
But I mean, to follow from what Glyn Ford is saying, Lousewies van der Laan, I mean, do you think there's a danger in getting too wrapped up in institutional arguments?
I think that you have to do both. Europe does an incredible amount for environment, for consumer protection, social protection, stimulating the economy, except that whenever something good happens in Europe, you'll find governments saying, look what we achieved. Whenever it's bad, they blame Brussels, the faceless bureaucrats or whatever.
If you want the content of the Belgian presidency, I'm against its presentation. I mean, it's a bit unfair on Belgium, because the same could have been said about the Swedes and the French and whatever, but it's actually relating what you're doing to what concerns ordinary people. And I don't think that process is done. I mean, it's all presented in terms that members of the European Parliament find interesting and exciting, but it's not presented in terms that the general public are going to be switched on by.
But I don't think it's the job of the presidency to appeal to all the peoples of Europe. I think that every government should appeal to its own people, and it's up to the Dutch government to convince the Dutch, and up to Tony Blair and the government to convince the British. And I think that we have to also, the governments have to take responsibility for the decisions made in Brussels, because they are actually involved in them, and they do create the impression that they have nothing to do with it, but that Brussels is imposing it. And there's a big challenge.
One of the Belgian proposals, which is potentially very controversial, is an amendment to the free movement provisions on grounds of public health, public security and public order. Now, I think there's a whole series of arguments around that can justify it. There's a whole series of other arguments that would actually pose enormous sort of civil rights problems. That's not being presented anywhere. I mean, it's buried somewhere in the footnotes. Now, I mean...
Well, the presidency's only just started, hasn't it? So they're concentrating on their priorities.
Okay, fine, but at some stage there's
It's starting tomorrow. We are going to listen to the Belgian Prime Minister tomorrow. Strictly speaking, it is starting tomorrow.
I think that they have a right mix of getting Europe's structure right, but also focusing on issues which people find important, such as food safety and other things. But, the proof of the pudding is in the eating. Let's see them get on with the job.
Then a presidency is not a dictatorship by any means. So I might disagree, although I'm a Belgian, although I belong to the Socialist Party, which is in government with others at this time. I might disagree with this point or that point of the Belgian presidency. But that is not important. What's important is going to be the presentation, for better or worse. I can agree with Glyn about that. And the answer of the Parliament. What is Mr. Pottering, who is going to be the first to speak, because he is the leader of the biggest opposition party, is going to say? This will happen in the European Parliament tomorrow. I can't comment on that now because I don't know what is going to happen. What are the other 14 governments going to say? I don't know. Are they going to agree with the Belgian proposals or not? Surely they have the right to disagree. No doubt some of them will. Though we have to carry all that. What I noticed with much pleasure is that Belgium took, I think, a good turn in taking the presence of the candidate countries inside the discussion. The Prime Minister selected a group of 5 people. I disagreed with his choice of people because there were not a single woman in the 5, and I think this is horrendous. But the good point was that he took Mr. Geremek. For the first time, somebody from the outside was going to discuss on the inside. This is the way things should be done, not by discourses, but by facts.
Lousewies van der Laan, you have been a critic of the Nice Treaty and continue to be so and have supported the result in Ireland, for example. Do you think there's anything that the Belgian presidency can do, in a sense, to kind of redress the balance that I think you felt was not well struck in Nice?
Well, I think the Treaty of Nice, the ratification is continuing at the moment, which I think is a bad sign, because it basically gives a signal to the Irish people: we don't care if you say no, we're going to continue nevertheless. And it's that kind of signal precisely which I think has turned the Irish people and a lot of other people away from Europe. So I do think we should treat these referenda results more respectfully. The governments are going ahead with ratification. At the same time, the underlying uncomfortableness about the way Europe is going ahead is, I think, something we should address. No one will understand exactly why Nice is bad. It'll make Europe less democratic, less able to act on all these other things, but it's very technical. But I think the feeling that Europe is being constructed without public participation, that people feel that their voice doesn't count, that is the thing that should be addressed. And that's why I hope that when we talk about the future of Europe, there will be public involvement, and the Parliament, I think, pretty unanimously has asked for an open convention method, whereby parliamentarians, governments can talk in the public area about this construction of Europe, and that people can have their opinion, rather than what we have now, which is the closed, secret meetings of the Council, the wheeling and dealing in the middle of the night. I don't think we'll completely get rid of that, but let's at least make sure the preparation is done in an open way.
Okay, well, speaking about preparation, I mean, when you all come back from your summer holidays, wherever you'll be going, we will all be finding that the trucks which are going to be transporting the notes and coins to the member states for the new currency, apart from Britain and a number of others, will be sort of ready. I mean, the actual physical sort of manifestation of the single currency will be taking place. And yet, not a day goes by when there aren't stories in various newspapers around Europe of citizens' worries, actually, about fraud and counterfeiting and swindling and price fixing and all that sort of thing. What is that the Parliament is discussing the euro and its preparations this week? What are some of the sort of suggestions that you've heard to actually tackle this concern, Glyn Ford?
Well, I mean, we're being constantly told, and I asked questions last month of the Swedish presidency, that everything is in place, but I am concerned that it's not actually in place as yet in terms of tackling counterfeiting. There's going to be a wonderful period of time when the whole world is going to see the euro currency for the first time, not only inside Europe but also outside of Europe. And one way to destroy the euro's credibility will be to find that there are a large number of 500 euro notes that are actually counterfeit.
Why isn't the EU prepared for that? What needs to be done?
Well, I mean, part of the problem is that they're not taking the necessary action in the process of setting up the arrangements. Now, this is 3.5, 4 months before they're going to start circulating the notes.
The sort of prosecutor.
Yeah, I mean, secondly, it's a wonderful opportunity to actually deal with money laundering. Everybody's going to have to get their Deutschmarks, their Dutch guilders, their Belgian francs from under their bed and go to a bank and change them. Now, we should be doing something about that. And then, of course, we've got the complete nonsense of the fact that each individual member state is going to have a separate currency with different pictures on it.
Well, the Belgian...
There's going to be something like 90 different coins that are going to be and notes that are going to be in circulation, all of which are legally valid. I mean, it's going to be a complete nightmare
Well, if it is a complete nightmare, as Glyn Ford is predicting, and he's looking happy to be out of it, you'll get blamed for it, won't you?
My first nightmare in that field was going to England when I was young and having to deal with a pound where there were, I believe, 20 shillings and a number of pence.
12 pence, 20 shillings.
And even with a 21 shillings guinea concept. That was very difficult for me at the time. But England survived. It survived.
But we're not just
French
talking about
survived.
people getting their head round the currency. We're talking about counterfeiting.
When President de Gaulle brought the French franc, it was horrendous. And after years after that, they were still talking in cents. We are going to have a big problem. But the main thing is trying to tackle this problem and making it possible for the citizen to survive. And the citizen has a problem because suddenly he is used to some unit and he is going to deal with something that costs, let us say, 4 euros 0.3698, and it's a very difficult concept.
We're talking about crime and counterfeiting. We're not just talking about whether the citizen understands the...
That is a matter for the government. It's a good matter, but it's a matter for the government. The citizens are not very concerned about counterfeiting. They are not going to manifest.
Not according to the surveys.
If there really was a serious attack on the euro through counterfeiting, and it became the counterfeiter's currency of choice, then and we were in trouble. Now, as someone who supports the introduction of the euro, I'm very keen it's done properly, and I think by making too many, if you want sort of politically correct concessions that everybody can have the right pictures on the notes and whatever, it's going to create confusion. I think we'll survive it in the end, but I don't think it helps in terms of going from where we are now to sort of 7-8 months' time when the currency is going to be in place.
Do you agree it could be a nightmare?
I don't like the complacency with which the ministers of finance are dealing with this at the moment. It is clear that there's not enough being done to prepare consumers. A lot of companies aren't ready. I think Glyn's right, the counterfeiting is not being taken care of. There's not really the procedures for the whole physical operation. I don't think there's any guarantees that'll work out well. I think it would be very bad if the first months of the new currency are chaos. Whether that is criminal chaos or consumer chaos, it is bad for the image of the currency. And as I understand that the governments don't want to cause a panic by getting into too much activity, I think they've now gone through the opposite direction, which is basically saying everything is okay and not doing anything. And they really have to spend these last months doing their homework.
Doesn't the presidency need to kind of provide the spur for that?
The euro, although it has been decided for years now, is a matter of priority for the Belgian presidency. So the Minister of Finance, which does not belong to my party, I think is reasonably concerned with that. I didn't disagree with Glyn Ford about the problem. I said that the citizens are not going to form committees against counterfeiting. We are not going to vote something that will alter drastically the problem of counterfeiting. The governments should deal about it, probably should deal more, but
I mean, they don't have much
that's
time.
Not a problem.
I mean, the trucks are actually sort of transporting these things in September, aren't they? They're beginning to.
Different governments, not only in Belgium, at least in France, have taken some special steps. And so far, I haven't seen anything collapsing. I wish that nothing will collapse, but let's not holler before it happens.